As you guys know, this is a live program. In about 15 minutes, you guys can call in to discuss any of the topics that we talk about or any topics that you want to talk about that we had not mentioned. And as we always do, let me introduce my co-host. First of all, Noel leader.
Peace. This is where truth and real talk occurs every Tuesday, 5 o'clock, Community Cop.
All right. Secondly, Big Mike.
Namaste.
All right. Okay, as you guys know, Michael Graves always has a wonderful historical piece to give us at the beginning of the show. So, Mike, I know we talked about the first black daily newspaper.
Yes, the New Orleans Tribune is the first black daily. Certainly those who follow the show know that we always acknowledge in 1827 Freedom's Journal was the first black press, period. But certainly 1 year before the Civil War ended, 1864, we have the first black daily. So we should acknowledge that, especially in this time when news has been perverted and obviously controlled by the white press. We have no say in what the news is today, per se, with the exception of shows like today. So we should always acknowledge, you know, the black press, and especially they started under adverse conditions. So, you know, the New Orleans Tribune should be commended for their contribution to our history.
And the significance of having controlling your own news medium is because you can sort of dictate how a particular story is told. Our community is so misinformed because we're dominated by the white media, and that's what we have to really understand. It is the white media. It's white controlled, it's white finance, it's objectives, and it's tint on all of the stories. You know, it comes from an opinion that far often than not doesn't agree with the African American opinion. So it was very important at that time to have a black dominated newspaper, and it's still important today. And that's why there's so much misinformation and confusion, be it international, national, or local. There's so much confusion in our politics because we don't control any of these mediums today.
Right. And also, you know, and you brought out a good point, Noel, the mediums that we did control have been destroyed, annihilated, taken from us, so we don't have an opportunity to listen to our stories being told by us. You know, it's very important to have a black perspective. It's very important to have our stories told by us. When someone else has an opportunity to tell your story, they can twist it, modify it, and manipulate it any way they want to. But also, Mike, this is the anniversary of the death of Eric Gardner.
Yeah, certainly. It's no doubt about it that, as we all know, especially here in New York, this brother was unnecessarily killed in broad daylight, in public view. Several people videotaped the footage. He was totally harmless at that time. He was not in the commission of a crime, even though it's constantly being reported that he was selling Lucy's, as we called them when we were little. We called them Lucy's, cigarettes. And but that wasn't the case, and he had just broke up a fight between two people. He was playing peacemaker when he was rolled on by more than a half dozen police officers, and certainly once his plea went out saying that he couldn't breathe, it was inhumane at that point to continue choking him. And yet, you know, you had 8 police officers who were all involved, 1 supervisor, in watching this man life being snuffed out in plain sight. Totally unnecessary. White people are not treated like that anywhere in America. This is a phenomenon that we experience, and certainly there might be others, certainly the Latino community and others might suffer that way, but none, you know, for the record, no community suffers like the way we suffer. It just does not exist. It happens to us primarily, and that's the focus of not only major police departments, but sheriff departments, all departments. They have no respect for black life. So if a black man pleads that he cannot breathe and to desist in what you're doing to him, it went on deaf ears among all 8 of them because they all had an opportunity to stop it.
And what's equally outrageous, not only about the murder of this brother, but it was captured on film. The entire incident was captured on film as a brother laid on the ground with his life being choked out of him, a legal tactic under NYPD memorandums. It was captured on TV, and the Staten Island District Attorney still refused to prosecute Officer Daniel Panaleo. And to add insult to injury, he still remains a police officer today. So as we come up to an upcoming mayor's race, this mayor administration refused to at minimum, fire him. At minimum, he should have been prosecuted, convicted, and incarcerated, but that didn't happen. But he, at minimum, should have been terminated. His employment should have been terminated from the police department. I know many police officers have been terminated for far less. The primary responsibility of any and every police officer is the preservation of human life. He lacked in his responsibility to make certain this individual who wasn't violently resistant, life was preserved, who said 11 times, I can't breathe, but was ignored. This mayor refused to terminate his employment from the New York City Police Department. And mind you, Officer Daniel Pantaleo had been sued previously for fondling the genitals of African Americans on at least 3 other occasions for conducting strip searches of African American males, and he was still in this elite unit, anti-crime unit, plainclothes unit, and his employment wasn't terminated. And final note on this mayor, who many of y'all are going to continue to support in the next upcoming election, this is the same mayor who promoted to sergeant, whose administration promoted to sergeant, Officer Boss, who participated in the murder of Amadou Diallo, one of the most horrific murders in NYPD police history. This administration and this mayor, he gives lip service to wanting to make changes, especially as it relates to police and the African-American community's relationship. But in reality, he's just as bad as your Giuliani, your Bloomberg, or, name anybody else you want to.
And just one small note to add to that, the police department had been actively, in a concerted way, looking out for Pantaleo. He's making in excess of $40,000 to $50,000 extra every year since this incident. So they're making sure, just in case something happens to him, that he's well taken care of, so that he's making $40,000, $50,000 extra in overtime. So whatever he's doing, whatever duties he's doing, they're making sure that he get paid to the max, just in case something happens.
And when you talk about cases like this and you talk about issues like this, and I'm glad Noel brought up the fact that there's a mayoral race, and we were going to talk about that a little later, we have to be diligent in ensuring that the elected officials that are put in place to ensure that the safety and the lives of our people and the people that they're supposed to be help govern are being protected. And that's not happening when you're talking about the violations of the lives and the rights of African-American people in this city. You know what, we have one more topic relative to history, but we're going to skip that for the moment because we're running out of time. We have a video that I want you guys to take a look at. It's concerning in North Carolina, a 9-year-old boy was arrested by the police, and all it appeared that he was doing was playing in the street. And then after he was arrested, when his mother came out to address the police and her concerns relative to the way her child was being handled, she in turn was arrested as well. But we have a short video that I want you guys to take a look at. Control room, if you guys can roll that video. All right. When we get the video going, we'll
right. If we have that, let me. It was in South Carolina when a young kid, 9-year-old child, was playing with a toy gun with his friends, and the police officer, I'm not certain if he received a phone call. He arrived on the scene, told the young man to drop the gun, and the young man dropped it immediately. The officer ordered him to come towards him, and then he placed him under arrest. He placed him under handcuff. This is it right here.
Step over here, little man. What's going on?
Nothing.
I'm detaining you for your safety and my safety, okay?
Handcuffing him for his safety, a 9-year-old child.
Where's your mom stay at? Down there where?
And there's a red tip on that gun.
There's a red tip on the gun.
Over there where? What's the address?
Now the kid is handcuffed.
Spartanburg, Bravo 57.
And you can see that that's a child.
Can I get a unit to go to?
Okay, you can watch, some of you, if you want to, can watch the whole film on YouTube. Here's a 9-year-old child, and some could debate whether or not children should be playing with guns or whatever, but it was clearly a toy weapon. This police officer handcuffed this young man who was cooperating with him, didn't resist, didn't run, didn't loudmouth. The cop said, come here. He came here, turned around, he turned around, and this police officer handcuffed him. You know, and then when his mother came out of the house and it was asking the police what was happening, the kid was just playing, you know, she was upset, and he arrested her as well. Now, he arrested the kid, I think, for unlawful playing, but there was no reason in the world to conduct himself in this manner, and this just shows the national hostility between members of the African-American communities, and I'm not even talking about adults. This hostility between white police officers and members of the African community, which is historic in this country, is consistent today. In our community, you know, we have to do something about it. We have to address this police brutality, this police criminality against members of our community.
Now, let me just say this. Now, and I know Noel said young man. That was not a young man.
Exactly.
That was a child.
That was
a child. So, you know, his response to how he addressed that child was totally inappropriate, unnecessary, unfair, and I can assure you, and maybe I should use the term assure you, but I believe that if that was a young white male, that same response would not have existed or would not have happened. Mike, and I have some more I want to say, but Mike, I know you want to talk.
Well, I'll just say very briefly, it's not much to say about when you see a manifestation of white supremacy as such. Well over 20 years, if you follow 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement, you know our history. We fought against toy manufacturers making look-alike guns. We fought very hard for years about that. Tried to, we used the few congressmen we had to initiate legislation around that. We fought to have red tips, orange tips, yellow tips, all these very colorful colors on weapons so that you can easily identify, so you won't have the situations that the African American community experienced of shooting unarmed youth with realistic looking weapons. So we've fought hard in this area, and that particular gun, as you can see, or I don't even want to say gun, toy, let me say it properly. That particular toy, you can see, was a toy, and it was very much identified by that bright reddish orange color. So those are the things we fought for going back well over 20-something years ago.
And let me say for the record, you know, when the police officer said that he was handcuffing a young man for the young man's safety as well as his, that's ludicrous. I mean, what threat does this young child, you know, pose to this police officer? So that just shows a lack of respect for the humanity of a child, because being handcuffed and being in that particular situation is a very, very life-challenging, you know, situation, and it will have an impact on the child. So, you know, I think our community ought to really have some real talks about this relationship with these individuals who have the power to come in our community, have the power to take a life, and have the power to make arrests, and very frequently abuse this power.
And, you know, unfortunately, there is a double-edged sword to this. And when I say that, I mean this. What happens is these things occur in our community so frequently that we become numb to it.
Right.
We accept it and we allow it to happen. Now, the other side of that sword is that the law enforcement community sees that they are going through this and these things are happening with impunity, so they continue to do it because they know they're not going to be punished. They know that there's not going to be any responsibility on their half to address these occurrences that occur in our community. So when I say double-edged sword, that's what I mean. We are becoming numb to it, and they are becoming so callous to it that they continue to do it. That's and right. We have to change our response to these things happening in our community. Also, next topic, and we're going to talk about this very briefly. There was a shooting in Minnesota of an unarmed female white by a police officer. Appears to be a black police officer from Somalia. And the reason why I want to talk about that is because when we look at the response from the community, when we look at the response from elected officials, when we look at the response from the media, when we look at the response from everyone who has an opportunity to see when shootings that occur of unarmed people, how they address them, how they deal with them, what the response is, what the outcome is. We've been watching members of our community shot by police, not being, there may be sometimes they're indictments, sometimes they're arrests, but there's never been any strong prosecution and sentencing in these particular cases. And I just want us to keep our eye on this case and see how the media responds, how elected officials responds, and how the judicial system responds. I don't know if any of you guys wanted to comment on that
agree.
particular case. Okay.
Well, one of the things that happened with this case is the police, the district attorney, I believe, moved it out of his jurisdiction and gave it to a state prosecutor, which you very rarely see happen in these police shootings. And did you see the video of the actual shooting?
There was no video.
Okay, there was
Of the actual shooting itself, the two police officers, their cameras were not operable. They were not
okay,
working.
this must have been another video.
They
where
were
it
cut
was,
off.
Right. Well, yeah. Well.
Right.
not
So
working.
we'll see how this winds up. But as you stated, some of the commentary on this particular shooting is amped up. Far above what we're used to seeing when African Americans are shot.
Right. So when we talk about the duplicity in the law in the justice system, let's see how this turns out. The Venus Williams, she was involved in a vehicular accident where a person had died. The response and the information that was disseminated by the media and by law enforcement was one that suggested that she was at fault. Turns out that video has shown something slightly different. Noel.
Right, and it's a little more than slightly. Venus Williams, some of you who may know, is a tennis star. Her and her sister Serena. This was Serena Williams. She was involved.
This was Venus Williams.
Yeah, this was Venus Williams. Her sister Serena Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you may know they're two of the highest ranked tennis stars in this country. She was driving a vehicle in gardens, and the Palm Beach Garden Police responded to an accident where an individual who struck her vehicle had died. His wife was driving the car, and the immediate news that I've heard was that she was at fault. And there was a rush to judgment by the police department, as it is with many African Americans. And the only thing I want to point out is even someone of her star status, she has a stellar history, a stellar record. There was a rush to judgment to say that she was guilty. Now, as a former law enforcement member of the New York City Police Department, we delay our response until all the evidence is in. But the individual who happened to be in the other vehicle who died, of course, was a white male. And, I just think it's highly typical. But I don't care what your life status is in this country. I don't care if you're a homeless individual or you're a multimillionaire, as she is. You're always going to be deemed to be guilty before innocent. Now, fortunately, in this particular case, there was a camera that had a straight, clear, and unobstructed view of that particular intersection to see that the individual's car who passed, he actually hit her vehicle, who was inside of the intersection, and she had to pause because another car was coming. So she was in the right. Mm-hmm. But my point is, as it relates to her, with a stellar history, her stellar reputation, she was deemed to be, by the authorities, to be guilty, before even all the evidence was in. And that's just atypical.
And I don't know if anyone is a tennis fan, but I enjoy tennis. I enjoy watching those two sisters play, and every time I get an opportunity to watch, I try to watch. But she was being interviewed after one of her Wimbledon matches, and they did not hesitate to bring that up and really put her under pressure, and where she just broke down during the interview. And my point is that they don't even have the decency to understand that she was going through something very traumatic, that someone had lost their life, but they were so interested in putting her on the spot that they started questioning her concerning that. And I thought that was very troubling, at least for me to watch during that particular time. But, condolences to the person, family who lost their life. But hopefully the truth, as we see, is coming out. Next issue. Texas police officer in Bois Springs, Texas, were indicted. Michael, I know you wanted to talk about that particular case.
Yeah, in this one, as we well know, the young man, Jordan Edwards, 15 years old, stellar record, scholar extraordinaire, coming from a party with the community. The community were all there, well over 100 people, no incident. Somebody called in and said something with respect to underage drinking was going on. Police officers responded, and Roy Oliver, of all things you could do, they were actually leaving. When he got to the party, they were leaving, and he actually pulled out his weapon and shot it, killing Jordan Edwards, who was on the passenger side in the front seat, and then had the temerity to lie and say that car was moving aggressively to bash him. But his own body cam showed that the car was going away from him, and he shot and killed Jordan Edwards for absolutely nothing. So once they found that out, they took his job right away. I'll give at least Texas credit for doing that, where other police departments have that wait and see policy and, kind of grind it out and measure the temperature in the black community. They did take his job pretty fast, but he just got indicted. So he's being indicted for the murder of Jordan Edwards, and for his 4 brothers who are family that was in the car. He's being charged with 4 charges of aggravated assault against them for firing that weapon recklessly into the car and, obviously killing Jordan Edwards. So that's good news that he's being indicted at this time.
And, Michael pointed out the facts of this particular case. Here you have a group of young men not engaged in any criminality, driving away from a party, and the officer just opens up and starts firing at him. Now, of course, the officer knows his actions were illegal and inappropriate and criminal, because when he was asked to give an explanation of his reasons, he lied.
Right.
My point is, this is not becoming the exception, it's becoming the rule. What kind of individuals do we have in these uniforms all across the nation that time and time again are being captured on film committing murder for unjustifiable reasons? And we have to stop paying attention to these individuals who say, oh, you can't believe these cops go to work thinking they're going to kill somebody. It's becoming clear to me that some of these police officers do have that in their mind, saying if they get into a particular situation that they're going to use deadly physical force, because in so many of these cases, there's no crime involved, there's no weapons involved, there's no reason to use deadly physical force. So the only explanation is that these officers have a criminal mind, a criminal mentality, and they're in uniform. And I said it before and I'll say it again, there has to be a response, because police officers, and I see if it happened once in a blue moon, once every 5 to 10 years, but it's happened over and over again where police officers are engaged in criminality to a highest extent, murder.
It's unfortunate that
police officers.
Right, and it's unfortunate when we listen to people, see, people really, and Noel, you always say this, words, you have to really listen to what people say. Now, when somebody says to you, well, he didn't wake up this morning thinking he was going to kill somebody, the average criminal doesn't wake up in the morning and say, you know what, I think I'm going to kill somebody today. Circumstances lead to them doing something wrong, and they end up getting involved in a murder, and they kill somebody. Certain circumstances lead these police officers to do whatever they do, and they kill somebody.
Right.
They have to be accountable. When you talk about someone's intent, it doesn't mean they intended that morning, they intended yesterday, they intended last year. We're not talking about premeditated murder. We're talking about you intentionally pulled the trigger, you intentionally killed somebody, and they died. There has to be some accountability. And until we start looking at the law for what it is and dealing with it across the board fairly and objectively, we're going to end up with these same cases. But the problem I have is that we are not holding our judicial system accountable, we're not holding our elected officials accountable, and we're not holding these police officers accountable. We have to make sure that these things are being dealt with appropriately, fairly, and justly.
Go ahead. Well, I'll just say for the record that video footage, which is certainly a godsend to the black community. Video footage showed 2 police officers speed to Walmart, and they have 203, 204 cameras in Walmart at that time. John Crawford was buying an air rifle in Walmart. And remember, Ohio is an open carry state.
Right.
In other words, you can walk down the block in Ohio with an AR-15 and nobody's going to say anything to you. You can legally do that. Here he was buying an air rifle. In Walmart, a white woman calls in saying that there's a black man in Walmart brandishing a weapon. He was walking around, he was going to purchase the weapon from Walmart in an open carry state. The police officers rushed in. You could see the camera footage. They rushed in and at a moment's notice took his life. They didn't say, he was on the phone. He wasn't even paying attention. When he turned and looked at them, it was too late. He just jumped back. Before he could even move, they fired on him, killing him, taking his life. because a white woman called and allegedly saying he was brandishing the weapon. You can walk around with the weapon in an open carry state, but it's something about a black man carrying it. And the footage is there. The police officers lied. And this is why it's disgraceful that the federal government just said they're dropping the investigation because they could not see anything where they could prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that they killed him outright. They lied and said they gave him verbal orders. It was an outright lie. You can see it yourself. If the footage covers it right there, you'll see yourself that he just got killed unnecessarily while on his cell phone.
Right. And one of the outrageous things about these police murders is that it's horrific when the individual murders of police officers, because police officers are representative of the state. They supposed to protect society, and they perform a very, very viable role in maintaining safety. But it's equally disturbing when these individuals commit murder themselves. So, I don't like when people put all the weight on it when a police officer gets killed, because that is horrific, because these individuals, they're brave and they sacrifice their own lives and safety to protect society. So that ought to be commended. But it's equally outrageous when a police officer murders a civilian, when he abuses his authority, when he abuses the place that we, all the authority that we give him in society, and he commits murder. So, these officers need to be convicted, and it's outrageous, that particular shooting. And there was an incident in Miami, and y'all can look this up on the internet, where 24 police officers fired on 2 unarmed black suspects. 377 times they shot into the vehicle. 377 times.
And let me just say that thank God that the Million Women's March is coming up soon in October the 28th, where black women from all over the world will assemble in Washington, D.C. 2 black women just got beat real bad by police officers. And just want to say, it's not time to go to the videos, but I'll just say quickly, in DeKalb County, that's in Atlanta. A sister was in a convenience store. The call was she was what do you call that, soliciting for money, begging for money? Yeah. She was begging for money. A police officer responds there and beat the stuffing out of her.
How was that could pick that up?
You just see him telling her, stay down, get on your stomach, and he just wearing her out with his baton. She's 38 years old. Yes, in all likelihood, she probably was begging for money. But however, that does not mean you have the right to beat her like you beating a slave. I know Atlanta was a Confederate state, but goodness.
Probably still is.
But still, I mean, the way he just beat her, demanding that she get on her stomach and put her hands behind her back, when you being beaten, you ain't thinking straight, and he just went out. He's beating her on her arms, beating her on her legs, and went upside her head at least once, just beating her real bad. And it's on video. It takes about a minute and about 47 seconds of beating before. And while he had the baton on the back of her neck, she tried to reach back for it. He told her he'd blow her brains out, and he cuffed her after that. But it's just disgraceful to see that type of beating. And the other beating was in Bakersfield, California, where a sister was just walking down the block. A guy earlier with hair on his face brandished a machete in a store. So when the police came to look for the guy was gone. A sister was walking down the block. Now, the guy was 5'10" and a big guy. She's a small little 5'2", walking down the block. 2 cops grab her, beat her, and allowed a dog to bite her. The dog got bites all over her, and then they cuff her, and then he claims after he cuffed her and put her in a car, oh, that's a woman. And they were after a guy. I mean, that's the sickness that's out here now. You're so sick and poisoned by 5 centuries of white supremacy that you think you was doing your job. You have no respect for human life. You have no respect for the mother of civilization that made you. It's just disgraceful to see a woman beaten like that. 19 years old. She hasn't even started her life yet. It was beaten, yes.
And I'm gonna come to you real quick, Noel. But when you mentioned something about, because you talked about both sides, it's unfair and unfortunate when law enforcement officers are killed and murdered. And I just want to give my condolences to the family of Sister Familia,
Right.
who was murdered senselessly. And believe me, I spoke to people who have worked with her in her command and said that she was, they talk about her in the media and the news, but said she was a wonderful sister. She loved the community and she loved her family. And again, my condolences go out to her family and her children. And I know you wanted to say something.
Right. I just really want to quickly say before we go to our phones is that, I've worked at a police office for the police department for a number of years. I had the opportunity to work up close and uncomfortable with many of these individuals. And I said then, and I said now, it's not the first time I'm saying it. The only observation I can make of the relationship and the sentiments that many of these police officers have, they hate black people. There's no way in the world I can confuse it anything but hate. Some people say it's a lack of training. Some people say some of these officers are afraid. They don't walk in our communities with fear. When that officer was beating that sister with a knife stick, he wasn't afraid.
Right.
When them two officers beat up that young sister, claimed they thought she was a man, they weren't afraid.
When that officer handcuffed that 9-year-old boy?
That 9-year-old boy, he wasn't afraid. These officers hate black people. That's what we have to understand. It's not a lack of training. It's not sensitivity. It's not a kumbaya session. These individuals hate black people. And I said it 30 years ago because that's the only way that you can treat somebody with such a level of disrespect and of brutality that you don't know, that is not engaged in any criminality, is that you have no regard for his life whatsoever. And that should be a wake-up call to our community. I mean, how much more videos we have to see? But the politicians and the religious community and the so-called civic liberty, everybody want kumbaya and training, and brother, it's getting worse, as you said earlier, Harper.
Okay. I'm sorry, I apologize. Let me go to our callers. First caller, welcome Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
What's going on, brothers? This is one Eric Josie, 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement.
Eric Josie.
What's up, P-Smooth?
Speak directly into your phone, brother.
Yeah, Eric.
Brothers, I love y'all, and it's good to see you, Julian, Noel, Big Mike. You guys are doing your thing. As you know, I'm out in the field. I'm observing you guys as I'm driving, so I can't stay on too long. But I just want to bring something to note that to question. Noel, you made reference to Venus Williams. I want to make a small correction. The police department did exonerate her. They did not give her a summons. The only person that rushed to judgment in her case was Venus Williams herself. And that's because Venus Williams and her sister has a propensity for white folks. They're married whites, they're with whites, they're having babies by white folks. So that's their mindset. So the only person that rushed to judgment is Venus. Brother Mike, as to that sister that was getting beat down in the store, I saw the video, but there's a part that we're missing here, that there was a big brother about the size of all of us that was observing and watching this whole thing. And I suspect that he was one of those videotaping it. So my question to you guys, at what point do we interfere? At what point do we intervene in a case like this when we see a brutal assault take place right in front of us as a black man to a black woman that's being beaten by an officer with a stick? And also, I want to ask a question. What are your thoughts about Sessions denying all these cases that come to his office as far as federal intervention? He said he's not going to intervene, and he's going to let law enforcement do what they do. Guys, I love you all, and I just want to respond to those questions.
We love you too, brother.
Real quick, East Move. Yeah, the police department in that county did say that Venus Williams was at fault in the accident. That was their initial response. They had to pull that back once the video came out. So the local authorities did put the blame on Venus Williams when the accident first occurred.
And certainly it's not a surprise for Jeff Sessions to, in his judgment, ameliorate all of these things that come before the Justice Department. He said he wants police officers not to be handcuffed, to be able to do their best job. Therefore, he's dropping all consent decrees, and he's not having the Justice Department probe into so-called police abuse. So he's already made that clear. And for the record, the DeKalb County has initially cleared that officer who just savagely beat that sister. They have said in their initial investigation before this video came out that his force was justified. And I can't sit in that judgment of the brother. Eric Josie, a strong warrior in his own right, it's right that it was a black man standing right there. I can't say what he should have done in that particular case. He was the one, I think, that was saying to tell his sister to calm down, to submit. He was saying some things on the sideline, something to the effect of, listen to what he's saying. But it's hard to listen when you getting your brains scrambled by a baton. So he was, so I can't say what he should have done, but the warrior spirit know what I would do, but I can't say for him.
And one of the things I think, Eric, that, and I understand your point, and I agree with you, but I think our responses have to be intelligent responses. I think we have to make decisions based on, we have to have a little foresight. Where's it going to lead to? What is going to happen if we respond with an A or with a B? Sometimes our responses may exacerbate things and make it worse for both parties. So I think when we do respond, we have to make an intelligent assessment, analysis, and then respond.
And real quick, as it relates to session, we too don't want police officers handcuffed when they attempted to do a very difficult job. But being accountable, being responsible for your actions is not handcuffing. So when he gives an explanation that he's releasing or relieving all these agencies of these dissent decrees, and then presupposing that having them accountable, having oversight, handcuffs, and that's preposterous.
Right. And it's important that, we really have to pay attention that when we talk about how police respond, there's duplicity when they respond in our community and they respond in their own communities. So, if you're going to have them be held accountable, if they do something in one community, they have to be held accountable in our community as well. So we have to look at the duplicity and make sure it's being addressed fairly, accurately, and justly, and that's not happening. Next caller, welcome to the Community Cop. Will you call from a quick question or comment?
Okay, how you doing, Brother Ray Ray? How you doing, Julian, Noel, Big Mike?
Mahotep, brother.
This case in Minnesota has to be watched very closely. The officer already apologized. Outside agencies is already investigating what's going on. Organization has been set up for the grieving family. And when you look at the stuff that happens to us, none of that happened. None of that happened. So I'm just saying that it has to be watched very closely and to see what's the reaction on this time. Another thing what I want to say is the government has allowed 160,000 H-1 visas where outside immigrants will be able to come to America and snatch up a whole bunch of jobs. Now, they're saying they're bringing these people in, but then they're saying they want to stop them. And that stops us from getting these jobs that's out there on this visa program. Can you give me a heads up on that? And they said it was a bipartisan in Congress. Republicans and Democrats voted for these H-1 visas. That's strange.
Well, it's not really because, Malcolm said a Dixiecrat is nothing but a Democrat and Dixiecrats are the same thing. Almost I had George Bush moment. So Democrats and Republicans, they're right down the line. Two wings of the same plane. There's very little different. Both of them support white supremacy. Both of them support the disenfranchisement of the African American community. You see it right here in New York, where so-called liberal whites that are gentrifying or land grabbing in Harlem and Bed-Stuy and Bushwick and all throughout New York, forcing African Americans out of their community. These are so-called white Democratic so-called liberals, so-called friends. There's no difference between Republican and Democrats. So.
Well, I'll look at the case from the outside, bereft of emotion for the most part, honestly. I'll look at it just to see as handled. CNN and MSNBC, ABC, NBC, all of them are looking at it very closely, so they're looking at it. I want them to look with equal dexterity and enthusiasm at what happened to John Crawford. I want them to look at Tamir Rice. I want them to look at Sandra Bland. Damn it, let somebody else look at what happened to white folks. I'll take myself out of that. I don't care what anybody say. I'll take myself out of that. I'm concerned about Rakia Boyd. I'm concerned about Ayanna Johnson. I'm concerned, like I said, about a 12-year-old boy playing right outside a school center and get killed savagely by 2 cops who claim they gave him verbal command and blew his head off. No. I'm concerned about our community first and foremost, race first.
And I understand, I believe I understand the caller's point. And if I'm wrong, you call back next week and correct me. I think that you're saying that we're talking like the same thing I'm saying. We're talking about duplicity when they look at these cases. We're not saying anything other than if this officer is unjust in this shooting and you guys find him to be unjust, then we want you to find these other officers who are unjust when they kill young African Americans and African Americans in this community. When they're unjust, we want you to find the same penalty and with the same intensity do investigations and make sure that the justice that needs to be found is found. But thanks for your call. I'm sorry. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Hotep, calling from the People's Republic of Brooklyn. How you doing, Julian, Noel, and Big Mike? I met you a couple of weeks at the International African Festival. It was great here.
Oh, brother, okay.
It was fantastic to see you, dear brother. Very well. But I just want to touch on this thing about Minnesota also. And yeah, they look at it. It's making the news and everything. But they tie that into that so far, according to the Washington Post, and I guess they're including her death in there too, 547 civilians have been killed by the cops so far this year in this country. And we hear, unfortunately, when the cops get killed or something, we hear these people from the union say there's a war, like this Lynch was saying a couple last week, there's a war on cops. But 547 civilians so far this year, according to the Washington Post, have been killed by cops. So if there's a war on anybody, there's a war on civilians. And it's a shame that during this part...
It's not a war on civilians. It's not a war on civilians. I think we can be more specific than that. It's a war on black people.
I hear you. I'm being cute. I hear you. All right.
Come on, brother.
I hear you.
Look, I think we opened the show talking about Eric Garner, who the entire world saw killed outright, broad daylight, from different angles. This man was pleading for his life. Never once, and he was a big man, never once went at Pantaleo. Never once. And we talking about Minnesota, which we don't even have the video to see. Why don't we talk about the things that we do see? Damn it, come on now. Come on now. To men rights, we saw what happened to a little boy, not a man, a boy. If y'all want to cry for that woman, fine. It's not like I just don't have respect for white life, but damn it, I got respect for black life. I'm not one of them that's conditioned to just go all out and look at Minnesota when we can look right here. We got a black man here killed, a little child with a comb in his hand, another one with a candy bar, another one allegedly with a wallet. Come on now. We've looked at situations.
I agree with you. That's what I'm saying.
This was one in the Port Noel. A little boy in Jamaica, Queens, killed outright, and he says, I didn't look at his age when the judge asked him, didn't you see that you was killing a little boy? He said, I ain't look at his age. He said, all I saw was his face, his color.
Black.
So, come on.
That's what I'm saying. Are they going to look at these 547 other people that were gunned down and killed by cops this year? I agree with you 100%. Why are they going to isolate? Are they going to tie everything in? I agree with you 100%. And the whole thing is that unfortunately at this time there seems to be a political vacuum now. There's no black leadership saying anything about this stuff now. There's no black movement anymore. Like whatever the hell happened to Black Lives Matter. You don't hear about nothing like that no more. And this happening under this criminal administration of Trump. There's no leadership out there. Nobody's speaking up anything about that. I agree with you 100%, Big Mike. I understand. Tie everything in it. I just mentioned
how many people so far have been killed this year. 547 people.
Okay.
That's a
All right.
war.
Okay, brother. All right. Thank you for your call.
Take
We
care.
appreciate your call. And I think you guys are both really saying the same thing. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Good evening, gentlemen.
All right. Quick question or comment?
All right, somebody got a cake for Brother Graves? Oh, man, I love your passion, Brother Graves. I love your passion. One more thing about that Minnesota case.
Oh, no.
How quickly this cop's name and photo were released to the media. When it's usually when it's a white cop, they don't release the name, or they release it maybe a couple of weeks later, and we definitely don't never see a picture of the police officer.
Right.
But it's just strange how fast they released this cat's picture and name to the media.
Good point. Good point.
Second, gentlemen, Brother Harper had mentioned Officer Familia and condolences to her family.
We did that last
I'm
week.
ashamed, and Floyd Mayweather should be ashamed of himself for using Officer Familia's death for a photo op. He should have brought $1 million check with him to donate to that family, because that family is really going through some stuff right now. And we all know Floyd Mayweather has a past history of abusing women and not caring about it and never admitting to it. He should be ashamed of himself. And just because he looks like one of us, that doesn't mean he is one of us. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right, caller. Thank you for your call, brother. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Where you calling from? You on the air? Where you calling from, caller?
East Flatbush.
Okay, go ahead. Quick question or comment?
Yes, I would like to know when will you people do you do any meetings in the community, in the future or anything like that? That was my question.
Yeah, well, if you have something that you want to invite us to, we do workshops, we do gang workshops, we do domestic violence workshop, what to do when stopped by the police. If there's an issue that you want our organization to respond to, you can reach us at 718-455-9223. That's once again
905.
Oh, I'm sorry. 455-9059. Thank you, brother. 718-455-9059. I don't know who that might give out.
Just made up the number.
Okay.
No, I know who that is. But you can invite us to any situation or event that you have.
All right, thank you very much.
All right,
Okay,
appreciate it.
All right. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Yes, calling out of the BX, and this is about Carteret, New Jersey, Middlesex County, where there was a 16-year-old young man beaten badly, brutally beaten. The officer failed to enact his body camera. He beat this young man. It was a car. He got into a car accident, and the young man came out the car. All accounts said that he went to his knees, hands in the air, universal surrender, and this guy just came up and pummeled him. Now, here's the thing. He was in a car accident. Even if he was dazed and walking around, he had a duty to render aid and also recognize, but this guy clearly had his hands up. But he beat this young man to a pulp. The Middlesex prosecutors hit him up with assault and misconduct, and he's been subsequently suspended from the force. I think his brother is the mayor of the particular town of Carteret, New Jersey. So that's basically it. Okay. What's going on right here in our backyard, and you can pick up that story on ABC News 7. It was done by A.J. Ross.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that call, caller. You want to say something, Noel?
Yeah, we heard about that story, and once again, people, you have to question yourself. Police officers who are charged with providing security and safety, who have a mandate, the preservation of human life. Why are these police officers, far too many police officers, acting like vicious dogs, acting like criminals, thugs, murderers? The overly unnecessary aggression is epidemic proportion at this point. Officers are out of control, and you hear nothing from the highest levels of government in this country.
And it's unfortunate when you talk about a rise in crime in any community. There's always a response. There's always a position of ensuring that the crime is quelled and those who are accountable are held accountable. But when you talk about it happening against our community by law enforcement, that's not the same response. But thank you for your call, caller. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
Hello?
Yes, sir. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment?
I'm calling from Murray Hill.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a very informative show, by the way. I just wanted to find out if you could comment quickly on the young African-American who was killed on the island of Zakynthos in Greece about a week or so ago.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your call.
Well, at least in Greece, from what we understand, they've already got maybe in excess of 10 people who are participating in pummeling him. So while, you know, American justice stands in abeyance because at least in Greece, even though obviously they felt free to beat him unabashedly, at least the police department there at least picked somebody up, where in America, mob violence is the norm. And nobody oftentimes is picked up when it's a group thing. So Greece is better than America.
For those who didn't hear that story, it's a young man, college graduate, went to Greece with some friends of his, was at a club, got in an altercation with an individual, left, ran, was chased by about 10 or 15 Serbians in Greece, and they beat him to death. So they were arrested, as Michael stated, and we'll follow that case to see if they're actually prosecuted and convicted. It's on film, so, you know, it's not even debatable, you know, but, you know, it was a very unfortunate situation.
Absolutely. Thank you for your call, caller. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Quick question or comment? Next caller, you on the air? I'm sorry, caller. I almost heard you. Could you go again, please?
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, caller.
Y'all can hear me?
Yes, sir. Quick question or
Yeah, I'm
comment.
the brother that voted for Donald Trump. What's up, brother?
How you doing, brother?
Yeah. Y'all ain't gonna hear nothing from Black Lives Matter until the next election cycle. That's what they are. That what they was founded for. To stir up the time when it comes time to election, to get Negroes to vote for Democrats. So you notice you didn't hear nothing from like that brother called up earlier. You didn't hear nothing. They don't give a damn about cops killing people. You know what I'm saying? Yes, they protest on it. I know all about that. But that thing is to drive the election vote to the Democrats. That's the only damn thing Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter is full of crap. You ain't going to hear nothing about Black Lives Matter till probably next summertime. You know what I'm saying? Other than that, and they got all that money, George Soros gave them $133 million. A lot of those Negroes, they went out and bought cars. George Soros sent his hitmen to kill a lot of those Negroes out there in Missouri. That's why a lot of those Negroes end up dead in their brand new car.
A lot of leaders have been killed out there. You're right about that.
End up dead in cars, and nobody don't know how they died or nothing. George Soros sent his hitman to kill their asses.
All right, caller. Thank you for your call. I'm getting to wrap it up from our producers. We're running out of time, so we're going to let our panel have their last.
Right. Yeah, the brother's 100% correct. Black Lives Matter movement was created and financed by white billionaires. They have a homosexual agenda. They're not serious about black lives really mattering. They do political theater, and they bring attention to the issue, which is a good, but they stop right there. They've never called for economic sanctions against any company, any agency that supports these police unions, any agencies that supports the fraternal order of police. So they limit their activity because they're financed by white people, just like many of your civil rights leaders, just like many of your religious leaders, and just like all of your politicians. So they will do just for so much, but they're not serious about anything as it relates to African people. Little more, I love you. Knowledge is power. Peace.
For the record, I'm very unapologetic when it comes to black life. When I see young girls being killed, when a young girl can go and get arrested in a hotel for absolutely nothing and goes into a detention center and is killed that night because she refused to take off a sweatshirt in front of grown men, it gives me pause. When I look at the senseless murders. So I say thank God for the Million Women March that's going to call women from all over the country and put the mothers of civilization front and center. Thank you, Sister Filet, so much for your valiant efforts in this sojourn in America. We need all hands on deck. Black man, black woman, protect the black child, accept your own, and be yourself.
You know, one of the things that we talked about briefly, and I think Noel mentioned it as well, we have a mayoral election coming up very soon. And there is silence, at least in my ear, from black elected officials, from the black community relative to what we're going to do to ensure that the issues that are affecting our community are addressed by this incoming administration, if it's not the same one. We got a lot of work to do. Nat, Sheila,